Fairbanks Focus Alaska View is brought to you by the University of Alaska Fairbanks, Alaska's first university, and the Fairbanks Economic Development Corporation, bringing economic development to interior Alaska.
Good morning and welcome to Fairbanks Focus Alaska View. On today's show, my guest is Graham Watts, director of Henry IV Part 1 for the Fairbanks Shakespeare Theater's Summer Shakespeare Show. Thank you so much, Graham, for being on the show this morning.
Delighted to be here this morning.
Awesome. Well, I guess I'm really curious. What keeps you coming back to Fairbanks so often?
Everybody who asks me that, they always say, why Fairbanks? It's the work, of course. It's one of the unique companies in the world in terms of Shakespeare, that they produce a different Shakespeare every year. And it's the company's 20th anniversary. So I'm here to do the 22nd Shakespeare play that Fairbanks Shakespeare Theatre have done. And hopefully we can complete the canon. Another 18 to go.
Nice. And how many times have you personally been up here to do Shakespeare?
This is my 9th. I've done a whole kind of range of plays. This particular one, Henry IV, is a comedy, and it's always fun to do comedy. We've had The Sun, we've got the great big set there out at UAF, and yeah, this season we think is going to be very, very special. And
this production of Henry IV, you're doing it Theatre in the Round. Why Theatre in the Round, and what challenges has that presented doing it? Well,
we first performed in the round in Atlin in Canada. We was on tour with the Winters Tower, and the venue was too small, so we went outside and we actually performed in a baseball park. And the actors loved it, and Bruce Rogers, who's the artistic director, has always wanted to perform in the round here in Fairbanks. We thought, with there being such a large cast and such a great cast of actors, to have that experience of the audience being really, really close as sometimes as you and I are, to see these wonderful actors work and this great, great, great story, we thought in the round is probably going to be the best format for us to tell this story.
And how do you get, because you're working with amateur actors and actors who've done, you know, plenty of Shakespeare before, how do you get a good performance out of everyone?
Well, I mean, you call them amateurs, but actually the majority of the cast are either professional or have had a huge amount of experience working either in Fairbanks or elsewhere. For example, we have 2 equity actors, which is what we have to do. They're there, which is Tom Robinaud and Jake Wade, playing Hal and Hotspur respectively. But then you've got Steve Mitchell, who's playing Falstaff. Now, everybody in Fairbanks knows Steve Mitchell. I think it's probably 30 years or more that he's been performing in plays in Fairbanks. So, strictly speaking, he's an amateur, but actually he's got probably more credits to his resume than any actor that I know. We also have Levi Ben Israel, a graduate of UAF, and he's been off and has been performing at the Shakespeare Theatre in Washington, D.C. So we've got this kind of wide range of experience, I think, right throughout the cast. And of course, that makes my job easy.
Do you think the story of Henry IV is relevant today? Because you're studying the play in a modern setting.
Yeah, I mean, we always generally perform in modern dress simply because our audience are modern. You know, we say that, you know, if there was an audience of 450-year-olds in the audience, then we might do it in Elizabethan dress, but they're not. All the plays are contemporary. I mean, one of the things that we've been talking about in terms of Henry IV is that you've got this kingmaker, Henry IV, the man who wants his dynasty to continue throughout history, throughout time. We're looking at him as a kind of Joe Kennedy figure because he's got 2 sons. The first one is a bit of a womanizer and a drunkard, and he's the heir to the dynasty, whereas the second son is much more able. And we're looking in terms of Bobby and JFK, of course, within there. So yeah, I mean, people will find the story extremely contemporary. The language, for example, within the play is extremely contemporary. It's surprising just how many phrases, when you see the play, are in current use today. Nearest and dearest, sink or swim, the better part of valor is discretion, and so on. So I think all these phrases just keep popping out because it was such a popular play in Shakespeare's lifetime. And of course, these phrases and the story still exists today.
How did you come about deciding to choose Henry IV, Part 1 for the summer? Is that something that's usually chosen by FST, or do you have a say in that when we know you're coming back to direct?
Well, Bruce Rogers is the artistic director, so with the job description goes that Bruce chooses the plays that's there. However, Henry IV is always traditionally the play that is used as an anniversary. So, for example, when they first opened the Shakespeare Memorial Theatre back in the 1900s, sorry, the 1800s, Henry IV. When it reopened in the 1930s, Henry IV. When the Royal Shakespeare Company went to the Barbican, Henry IV. It's always that one, simply because, of course, it's his most popular play and probably his funniest and most fun play. So the two go together. If you're having a celebration, as we are with the 20th anniversary, kind of Henry IV chooses itself.
And who are some of your favorite characters personally in the play?
Well, you have to say Falstaff. I mean, Falstaff is such a large character in every sense of the word. He's a big, fat man. They refer to him as a fat man, in no political correctness in those terms. And they tease him. He's a lot of fun. He's an old rogue. He's everybody that if you walked into, say, the Big Eye or somebody like that, you would see Falstaff sitting there. He's a real character. And of course, he's extremely funny in some of the things that he says. At the other end, you have Hotspur, who's a big warrior. He's a rebel. He's leading a kind of rebellion against the land. But again, he's got this amazing sarcastic wit. His use of language is absolutely hilarious. But at the same time, of course, he embodies this rebellion that goes on in the land. So he's a particular favourite of mine. But of course, there's Mistress Quickly, that people will know, who's the hostess, shall we say, in both senses of the term, in the tavern that's there. It's a big story with lots of characters.
Did you have trouble casting or finding enough people, because I'm sure there's some double casting in Fairbanks, because we're a pretty big community, but we're also, it can be kind of difficult to cast big productions. Well,
funnily enough, I mean, we were saying that we auditioned obviously in Fairbanks, and it was the biggest turnout certainly that I can remember, and I've been coming here for 11 years, and we had the most people turn out that I've ever known. We've also had people that wanted to do the play simply because it was the 20th anniversary. So we got Steve Mitchell coming back and playing Falstaff. Levi Ben Israel has come back to us for after I think it's 4 or 5 years. Fantastic actor, and he's come back to play Westmoreland and Poins within it. And then we've got our regulars. I call them the regulars, they're always in my play. Shannon Luster, probably the funniest man in Fairbanks is Shannon.
Definitely.
So we've got Shannon, Andrew Castle, who's doing brilliant work within this play, J.K. Bowen and so on. So we've got all these people that we've been able to draw on over the years. I should mention Emily Yates, who's playing Lady Percy, who was a fantastic Desdemona for us in Othello a few years ago.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Do you remember that? Yeah, and I managed to twist Emily's arm to come back as well. So yeah, we've had all these people who are either willing to be in the production or help us because of it being such a great play and it being the company's 20th anniversary.
Do you, as a director, like to insert little unique things in your productions that are, because it is Fairbanks, and so do you find yourself kind of inserting unique Fairbanksisms or just Fairbanks aspects into your productions?
Yeah, I do. I mean, you always have to remember the audience that you're playing to. You can't just, put on a play in isolation. You have to think of the people who are watching it, their own sensibilities, the things they find fun within the play. For example, just before I came here, I did the Comedy of Errors in Hamburg, Germany. A very different audience. So when I'm directing for Hamburg, it's very different to how I direct for Fairbanks, Alaska. So yeah, I mean, of course, there's lots of Alaskan references. There's Carhartts, there's kind of bugs. There's, of course, big drinking scenes and so on and so forth. So yeah, it has to be accessible to the audience, or why do it?
Mm-hmm. What are some of the more challenging things you find about community theater or about working outside in general?
Outside in general. Of course, you never know what the weather's going to be.
Well, that's true.
You know, we live in Bias Drive off of Chena Hot Spring Road. It can be absolutely pouring down with rain there, but where the site is at University of Alaska Fairbanks, it can be sunny. So you kind of don't get weather, you get seasons, don't you? So we just carry on, to be honest with you. In the 20 years that the company's been performing, they've only cancelled 2 performances, ever. So we always carry on. So we'll be out there in the rain, we'll be out there if there's bugs there, we'll be out there if it's intense heat. So yeah, we just keep calm and carry on.
Sounds excellent. I'm personally looking forward so much to the show. I think it's going to be an amazing, amazing performance. Before we go, feel free to let everyone know, you know, when the performance is happening, where they need to go, that sort of thing.
Happy to do that. Well, we open on the 12th of July and we run until the 29th of July. It's Thursday, Friday, Saturday at 7:30, Sunday at 2 p.m. And if you're lucky enough to be under 18, if you come along on a Thursday or a Sunday, then it's totally free for you to get in. So how about that for a deal? Hey,
fantastic, fantastic. And oh yes, I just remembered, before we go, I'm just curious, what would be your dream performance? What would you like to either direct or act in the future?
In terms of Shakespeare?
Yeah.
Yeah, one of my favorite plays of Shakespeare wrote, and it's little known, people don't really know it, is Timon of Athens. And that's all about greed and bankers and recession and what happens when somebody who's very, very rich is suddenly exploited by these kind of predator financiers. So it's an extremely contemporary story. And the second half of it, of course, takes place in the woods. So if you think of a location, Birch Hill, which is kind of where we're living, you know, that is the location that Shakespeare wrote. So yeah, I'd love to do that play. Whether they'll let me do it or not is another question.
That'd be amazing. It sounds kind of like Wall Street, honestly.
It is. I mean, it's totally Wall Street. But I think any play which you come to with Shakespeare, it's just extraordinary just how contemporary the stories and the characters and how much resonance you can see in your own lives when you see a play of Shakespeare's.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being on the show this morning.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
It's been wonderful. Thanks.
Thanks, Melissa.
Well, stay tuned. The Roundtable with Jim Whitaker and Ed King is up next.
Welcome to the Roundtable. Joining me today are economist Ed King and Joe Stewart from the Fairbanks Economic Development Corporation. Welcome, gentlemen. Well, it's an old subject. We've been talking about it for a long time. It's a tough subject. It's been one that has been difficult to bring concrete solutions to, but it seems as if we're getting close to that point. The Fairbanks Economic Development Corporation has utilized the proceeds of, it's my understanding, a state grant to produce a gas distribution study analysis with conclusions for the Fairbanks area. Joe, I know you were deeply involved in that discussion and the formation of the report. Why don't you bring us up to speed on it? Tell us about it.
Sure. I'm a man who likes to give credit where credit is due. So actually, FEDC, we acted in support. The contract itself and the report itself was compiled and written by a super team of professionals in the state. It was actually Northern Economics, Baker and Associates for engineering, SLR for environmental work, and in the AEB for business model analysis. And the report is, as you said, regarding gas distribution. The fact of the matter is, and it's been recognized for a while, people think of gas as a possible solution to both our energy and our air quality problems. But the fact of the matter is that our existing gas infrastructure, the means to move gas around so people can utilize it, is very, very small. So that if we as a community want to really tap into and benefit from gas, we would need to start working out the bugs of how we would move that around to bring the most benefit to the most people as quickly as possible. And that's really what the study was all about.
Okay, so benefit to the most people as quickly as possible. That's the goal.
Yes, sir.
All right. So
Sure.
what's the result? What happens?
Okay, the result. The study has been produced. In fact, as of Friday, the final draft was brought in. And the result is that it is technically feasible for us to expand our gas distribution infrastructure to reach the vast majority of the Fairbanks public and the structures in which they dwell and work. Of the 28,000 structures within the borough, the gas distribution system that was designed, it's a piped system, would reach over 80% of them and over 90% of the businesses and business structures in town. They did a cost estimate based on the design of that system, and it is a little pricey.
What does that mean?
As far as a little pricey?
Yeah.
The bookends of the engineering work and the cost estimate are between about $280 million and about $600 million, with the base cost of estimate, the number upon which they do all the financial work within the study, of about $400 million. Okay. But to put that in relative terms, in a year, this past one, we were spending about $4 a gallon on our fuel oil. That sucked about $600 million out of our economy, and some would say about $300 million more than needed to.
So the system, just using those very rough baseline numbers, the system is going to cost $400 million. The savings are roughly $300 million per year, given that it's done, and all of the assumptions in the model are indeed correct.
That is
correct.
So
that, from a community perspective, would be a very worthwhile endeavor. It would save a lot of money very quickly.
And that is what the report states.
Okay.
The system that they designed, again, is a piped system that runs all the way from Chena Ridge to Eielson Air Force Base, and from the city gate straight to the front wall of your house. Okay. It is a very extensive system.
All right. So good work on the report, because it does provide some baseline.
Now, if I may, I'd like to add one more thing.
You may.
Again, a pipeline system running from Chena Ridge to Eielson, from the city gate to your front door. But there is discussion about those that might conceivably have been left out and would be left out of that system, and that regarded propane and propane delivery. And so some of that analysis was done as well, either propane or perhaps compressed natural gas. The target we were shooting for was 100% for everybody.
Okay.
And so we're still working towards that.
What are you going to do with this report? What's the next step, I guess, now that the report's done?
Well, the initial next step, and it should begin immediately, is to begin a public discussion of how we might begin to implement this system, or some system like it. What comes out in the report is that it is technically feasible to design and build a system like this, and that it is highly, highly likely that the benefits would be substantial, again, both to our cost of energy and to our PM 2.5 and our clean air problems, so our quality of life, and that we should begin that discussion immediately.
And one of the things that led up to this whole study and this whole discussion was this whole chicken and egg thing. It's like, if we do get gas here, we have no way to distribute it, but if we build a distribution system without gas, we just have empty infrastructure. So how are these things going to get tied together?
That is a legitimate and should be part of the community discussion. We know that we have entities that are discussing building a gas transmission system from the North Slope. In fact, we have many. There's gas trucking. There's a small diameter pipeline. There's the large line.
Let's stop there,
Sure.
because I think that may be the fulcrum point for whether or not something can actually happen. Because you're looking at somebody who, from the time I was much younger than you until now, has been trying to get gas to Fairbanks. What has kept us from doing that in the past has been competing interests. Those that are currently providing energy to Fairbanks do not want to be displaced in the marketplace. Therefore, they'll try to stop it. Those that have an opportunity to participate and yet in the end may not be able to, would also be against it. And I think that as a community, we need to understand that. Apparently this idea works. Many of us think that it should have been done years ago. But we will still see that vested interest opposition to it. And while you mentioned a community dialogue, a community discussion, sooner or later somebody's going to have to say, this is what we're going to do. Joe, any ideas as to who that might be and how that might come about?
Well, I think that it all begins with setting a community goal. Goals are what determine strategy.
Okay,
and they're what guide decision-making.
Here's the goal. I'm a citizen, and therefore my goal is to pay my bills and enjoy my life. So I'd like to be able to have affordable energy and clean air. So those are the goals. Mm-hmm. You established a means by which we can probably get there. So we got the goal. Now how do we get there? And I'm not asking you to be the all answering one on this one. I know it's a very, very tough issue. My point is, somebody's got to say, look, this makes sense, let's do it. Ed, your thoughts?
And on those same lines, I think that what this distribution can do, if we do build it out, is say, hey, we have the infrastructure, bring us the gas. We have a market, it's ready and willing and able to receive that supply that's currently constrained. So, you know, we can break that chicken and egg cycle by having something that's already built, and we might have to invest in that. So I think that's good work that you guys are doing.
Yeah.
Or the fact that people see that we are, in fact, building it out. Those things work in tandem and come to a confluence.
Right. Well, but here's...
Hold on. But if I may,
okay.
sir,
Please.
if I may interject.
Go ahead.
What this report does do is serve as a foundation for those discussions and a foundation for decision making. You asked about what entity would, in fact, bring the gas to town. Or what entity would be in charge and manage and operate the system that moves the gas around. This report doesn't answer that question.
Right.
But what it does do is provide analyses of the kinds of business models we might consider to give an assessment of the relative strengths and weaknesses of each one of those models,
right,
to serve as a basis for decision making. And then also show what the likely impacts of any one of those choices might be. So we have a very valuable tool. Again, it doesn't answer that question. I believe, and I think many of us believe, that is a question that we as a community should answer. Not necessarily those outside interests, but we as a community should
Well,
try
wait a
to
minute,
answer those
let's be clear. Those are not necessarily outside interests. Those are
outside,
internal interests.
Those outside are internal, let's just say those entrenched interests.
Sure, and that's a good way to describe it. Entrenched interests that are not necessarily in the community's best interest.
But that all have a part to play.
Perhaps they do, perhaps they don't. I just want to give you the benefit of my experience. When you try to include everybody and try to have everybody win, it's not always going to work. I can guarantee you that those who used to sell whale oil as lamp oil as a means of providing lighting were not pleased with electricity. And we're at that same level of decision making with regard to how we energize ourselves in Fairbanks. There will be winners, there will be losers. What's imperative is that we as a community understand the community as a whole must be the winner with regard to our energy solution. I think this is a good report. It's good work, and it does provide a basis from which to move forward. But we can't move forward at a snail's pace, because remember the goal. Pay your bills, enjoy your life. We're having people who are seriously considering leaving this area because they can't pay their bills and they can't enjoy their lives. So we've got a big task in front of us that's going to require some significant leadership real fast.
And it's been said of this report that one of the benefits of it, possibly one of the biggest benefits of it, is as a source of hope. And I know that sounds cliche, but for those people that are thinking about moving town or leaving town, I've not heard one of them say to me directly or through someone else that they're leaving because they want to.
Right.
They're leaving because they feel like they have to, or that they feel that the potential saving of them is too far out of their reach.
Sure.
What this shows is that, and hopefully it can show, is that it is within the reach, and that if it does provide some data and hopefully an understanding and an impetus so that people can see that the bright light at the end of the tunnel is pretty close, and then maybe they can hold on. And if we begin to work towards that goal, then we can get there and they can stay.
Okay, well, I hope that we all have hope, but I also hope that there's realistic considerations with regard to that. Ed, any closing thoughts with regard to energy in Fairbanks and the report that has been produced?
I think it's a good step that we're moving towards, and it's going to obviously cost a lot of money, and we're going to see a lot of discussion in the legislature next year, and that's good ammunition for us as a community to have. So I'm happy that that's out there.
How about timing? Let's just discuss timing a little bit here. Report is complete. Some organizational structure is being considered for the entity that will be in charge of this, not only distribution system, but the gas that will flow into the distribution system. That is going to be a real point of contention. The rationale given by the legislature last year for not doing more was that, hey, wait a minute, you don't have the organizational structure in place, so we don't know to whom we would be delivering the funding to provide this, this new source of energy for Fairbanks. Your thoughts on that? How do you see that coming together, and how quickly do you see that coming together? I'd like your thoughts and then yours, Joe.
I have two kind of thoughts about that, I guess. One is there's already a lot of infrastructure in the ground in terms of pipe. The FNG already has a substantial amount of infrastructure in the ground, and it would be much more economically viable to expand on that system than to start a whole new system through a whole new entity. The problem with that the community or members of the community are going to have is that we have state money going into private hands to expand a private enterprise. So there's going to be that contention. I can see that happening. It's not going to be. This isn't just an easy blanket answer that we can just start tomorrow. It's very difficult, and I don't know how we're going to overcome that.
Okay. And if you were a vested interest that didn't want this to go forward, you might put some emphasis on that problem and that challenge.
Yeah, the easiest way would be for whatever entity this is to purchase FNG and make it a not private entity. But there's apparently opposition to that.
Yeah, we tried that once, and we're still going to have to deal with the same dilemma. Joe, your thoughts on how we move forward from here. What has to be done next? And don't give me the community dialogue answer. We know that's part of it. But what is going to have to be done within a reasonably short period of time in order to move this forward?
Well, you all have touched on supply, and that is a nut that needs a cracking. In short order, we need to figure out how to ensure that the amount of gas that comes to our town is sufficient to feed the needs of the town. The entities, well, gas distribution is part of that. Making sure that, again, you have the base of distribution to ensure that you have enough flow through to make it affordable to people. Farther up the food chain, so a lot of the discussions that have been happening to date regarding the most immediate means of bringing gas to town do not afford efficient supply as currently designed. And we would need to figure out how to make sure that gas is provided. Immediate steps in that regard involve, again, defining how much gas we need, finding out how much it would cost to bring that extra volume of gas to town, so that we can begin doing the work to get the money to make sure that that volume will be available.
Okay, and all of that needs to be in front of the legislature in January of next year.
But fundamentally, and actually you're bringing it full circle.
Right.
For years now, we've been a divided community.
Okay, Joe, we're going to run out of time, so get it to us quick.
Fine, I'll get it to you quick. We've been a divided community, and divide and conquer is a military maxim because it works. And when I talk about a community discussion, I mean coming to community consensus, so that when we do go down, or wherever we go, we're all in the same book, we're all on the same page. We are at our strongest, and historically have shown that we are very successful if we all get together behind a common purpose. And that's what I mean about a community discussion, finding that common purpose so we can move forward.
Good. Well, gentlemen, that does it this week. And to those of you listening and watching, next week the roundtable will be here. You'll see some different faces. And let's keep Fairbanks moving forward. All the best.